Let me tell you something strange about deep thinkers. We live in a world that celebrates clarity, confidence, and quick answers. Yet some people move through life slowly, thoughtfully, almost hesitantly. They feel everything more deeply, question everything more thoroughly. And here is the question that always lingers beneath the surface. Why does understanding more often seem to hurt more? At first glance, deep thinking looks like intelligence, insight, wisdom. People assume it's a gift. And in many ways, it is. But that's not the full picture. Beneath the surface, there's an entire psychology at play. One that reveals how awareness, when unprotected, can quietly become a burden. See, for some people, thinking deeply isn't a choice. It's a reflex. You don't skim life, you sink into it. Conversations echo long after they end. Emotions don't pass through you, they settle. You replay moments not to dwell, but to understand. And while others move on quickly, you stay behind, unpacking meaning. From the outside, it can look like overthinking, sensitivity, indecision, but inside, it feels different. It feels like responsibility, as if understanding something fully is the only ethical way to exist. You notice patterns others miss, the tone beneath the words, the pause before someone answers, the contradiction between what people say and what they live. And once you see these things, you can't unsee them. Awareness becomes irreversible. Psychologists have found something fascinating here. People who think deeply often score high in traits like introspection, empathy, and openness. They don't just react to the world, they metabolize it. But this depth comes at a cost. Because the mind that searches for meaning rarely finds rest. It's not about being pessimistic. It's about seeing too clearly. But here's what's often misunderstood. Deep thinkers don't suffer because they think negatively. They suffer because they think completely. They consider consequences, context, history, emotional impact. And in a world optimized for speed, that kind of thinking can feel like a liability. We live in a culture that rewards certainty, strong opinions, quick conclusions, and if you hesitate, if you say, "I am not sure," or "it is complicated," you're often perceived as weak or confused. But deep thinkers know something others avoid. Most truths are layered. Most answers are unfinished. So you pause, you question, you resist simplicity. And that resistance isolates you. For some, the suffering begins after emotional burnout, not a dramatic collapse, but a quiet exhaustion. You've tried explaining yourself, softening your thoughts, shrinking your depth to fit into lighter conversations. But each time you do, something in you feels betrayed, so you retreat. Not because you dislike people, but because being fully present requires too much filtering, too much translation. You crave spaces where complexity is allowed to exist without apology. But solitude, while soothing, has its shadows. Because when you spend too much time inside your own mind, it can turn against you. Thoughts spiral, questions multiply, meaning fractures into possibilities. And instead of clarity, you find paralysis. Here's the paradox. The same depth that allows you to understand life more richly also exposes you to its weight more fully. You feel injustice more sharply, loss more intensely, absurdity more painfully. And while others distract themselves, you sit with the discomfort, trying to make sense of it. There's an existential layer here that's easy to miss. Deep thinkers don't just ask how to live, they ask why. And when those answers don't come easily, life can start to feel ungrounded. As if you're standing on philosophical fault lines while everyone else walks on solid ground. In a world that says just be happy, asking deeper questions can feel like rebellion. But not all suffering comes from insight. Some comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of expressing thoughts that don't fit neatly into social scripts. Fear that if you speak honestly, you'll be seen as too intense, too heavy, too much. So you learn to hold back. You speak selectively. You become articulate in silence. And over time, That restraint becomes loneliness, not because no one is around, but because few truly meet you where you are. Studies suggest that highly introspective individuals often experience heightened nervous system activity. The mind stays alert, always scanning, always processing. Stillness becomes rare. Rest feels unearned. The mind opens wider. The body never fully relaxes. This isn't because depth is pathological. It's because depth requires grounding. And without it, awareness floats without an anchor. But maybe the question isn't why deep thinkers suffer. Maybe it's why the world makes so little room for depth. Because let's be honest, modern life doesn't reward contemplation. It rewards output, positivity, performance. And if your inner world moves at a different pace, you're often left feeling out of sync, as if you arrived at the wrong era with the wrong temperament. Yet there's something quietly powerful here. Deep thinkers see beneath appearances. They resist shallow certainty. They carry the ability to hold contradictions without resolving them too quickly. And while this makes life heavier, it also makes it more honest. Maybe that's what real depth demands. Not constant joy, but integrity. Not ease, but alignment. And maybe suffering, in this context, isn't a flaw. It's a signal. A sign that your mind is tuned to frequencies others ignore. That you're engaging with life rather than skimming it. But depth doesn't have to mean drowning. Perhaps the invitation isn't to think less, but to hold yourself more gently while you think. To let meaning emerge without forcing it. To allow questions to exist without demanding immediate answers. Because sometimes the most profound understanding arrives not through effort, but through presence. So if you've ever felt like your mind is both your sanctuary and your prison, if you've ever wished you could care less but couldn't, if you've ever been told you read too deep when all you were doing was being honest, maybe there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe your suffering isn't proof of fragility, but evidence of engagement. And maybe, just maybe, the world doesn't need you to think less deeply. Maybe it needs you to rest more deeply, too. Because in the end, being a deep thinker doesn't mean you're meant to carry everything alone. It just means you see more, and learning how to live with that sight gently, patiently, compassionately, might be the deepest wisdom of all.